everyone.
Hello.
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 Hi. So today we are talking about the tabletop RPG development cycle, or soon. Why does everything take so long? Which is a question I'm sure we've all asked, both as consumers, when are we going to get our products, or as people working on a product, when are the people bringing me stuff going to bring it to me, or people creating the product, when am I going to finish this map? Which is the common cry in our house. So initially, I'm going to ask Andy Law to give us a little bit of an overview of the whole development cycle. I can already see we've got some questions, which we'll come to, so keep on bringing them in, and I'll bring them up onto the screen. And once we've done the overview, we can dive into any part of the life cycle that you're particularly interested in, or my fellow rooks on the stream would like to talk/moan out.
Oh, nothing like a good moan.
Talk/moan is modus operandi.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Talk/moan/rant. So Andy, over to you.
Alrighty, so I have been involved with every single step of the production cycle at one point or another from multiple different angles. Sometimes I've been responsible for overseeing the whole process. Sometimes I've been one tiny part of a far larger machine. I've seen it both from the outside and the inside, and it's fair to say almost every company I've worked for, whether directly or as a freelancer, they've had a different process. There is never something that is consistent across all of them, because everyone's got their own idiosyncrasies, everyone's got their own areas that they prefer to focus on. But loosely, there is a process. And I'm going to go through that very quickly now so that we at least have a framework that we can all rely on as we're moving forward and discussing this. So here we go. Step one. It's a new RPG product. Where do you begin? The first step is design. Now, this goes under many different names according to who you work for. It might be called the pitch. It might be called, we're going to make a book. It could be under any variety of titles, but loosely, the initial concept is laid down. This is a process that you might think would take not very long, but for some companies, I've seen this take 2 months, 3, as they decide exactly what they're going to do. This is before they've even written a word. So the first process is design what is going to be in the product. It's not the nitty gritty, it's the core. This is the pitch of what we're going to offer you. The next step is usually writing. Now, I've been in a few products and projects where writing didn't come next and we went straight to art, but usually writing comes. Indeed, I was almost waiting for it's going to come. Indeed, I've been employed a couple of times to do maps before any of the writing began. But normally writing comes next. And this is where all of the design is transferred into all of the core writing for the document. There's normally a project manager, a developer, a producer who's responsible for overseeing this. Sometimes in some places it's an editor. And this process can take anything from short PDFs, a few days, to months, if not for some books, years. And as I'm sure Graham will discuss possibly a little bit later, decades. Writing can take a while, depending entirely on the project at hand. The next step after writing, and one that often comes hand in hand with writing, is development. This is where the project lead gives ideas back to the writers. In some companies, it's the editor who does this. In others, the editor and the developer are quite separate from each other. And they develop the text and they try to make sure that whatever is created by the authors at hand matches the overall arc for stories or for the pitch for the game line or anything similar. Development as a step can take ages, particularly if what has been offered by the writer didn't match the original pitch. And it's something going in a completely new direction because the author perhaps just didn't like it or didn't read the pitch, or who knows. So development can take some time. Normally you don't want it to take very long, but it generally takes at least a month of text going backwards and forwards, if not much longer. The next step after development, and sometimes incorporated inside development, is editing. This is when you take the polished content that has been developed and you then turn it into actual polished text. This is hopefully final text that definitely makes sense. Editing, again, depending on the length of the product at hand, can take quite a long time. It can be short. Recent books that Graham was involved with in The Enemy Within, for example, editing's generally a month or two with most of those texts. Editing for shorter PDFs, generally not more than a couple of weeks, but it can take longer, again, depending upon the freelancers or the in-house editing staff at hand. After that, we then start reaching a gray area because we hit the art. Now, art does not start after editing, but art is generally along the linear tree placed after the editing, because often art is done once the text is locked down and we know exactly what needs to be illustrated. That is not always the case. Sometimes artists start art long before the text is nailed down, and that can cause issues sometimes. So art is generally laid down at this point. There's normally an art director who's responsible for dealing with this. Sometimes that's the same person who's the overall producer who's dealing with all the text too, which can again cause some issues. The art is organized for what will be needed for the book. Sometimes the book will already start into the next process, layout, where all of the text and all of the art is placed inside the book or the product or the boxed game or whatever. That's the almost last part, because once you've finished all the layout and everyone's happy with it, we have ourselves a finished text. We have ourselves hopefully very pretty one. But there's still one very important step that many people forget, and that's proofreading. Proofreading is when you take all of the finished proofs, so to speak. Normally the proofs are actually on the printing side, but proofreading is generally dropped in this part. You check the whole text and you make sure that layout hasn't caused issues that weren't expected. It's quite common that they do. Text can go missing off pages, or words can be copy and pasted in incorrectly or something similar. Proofreading is then done, and hopefully you're then ready to publish. That should hopefully bring you right through to the last hellhole that is printing, assuming that you are printing your product and you're not just releasing it digitally. The only other step that I would add into all of that is a step that we very recently went through here, and that is playtesting. Playtesting is a very important part of some products' life cycle. It's not part of the general life cycle because many products don't require a playtest, but it is worth mentioning that playtests can take a bit of time. As we noted with our Ship of Fools, when we dropped into that playtest, we put aside just over a month for it, and everybody said, please too, go on, please too. So we went, all right. So there's another month on your timeline already. So there we go. That's our loose step from the initial pitch, the design, all the way through to the end, where we have ourselves, hopefully, a product that's ready to be printed. Again, I'll add the last caveat. Every company does it differently. It's quite likely that if you deal with another company at some other point, they'll have a completely different process in place. But loosely, that is the timeline.
Yeah. It's also worth pointing out at this stage the terribly wise adage that the difference between theory and practice is that in theory, there is no difference.
That's why you're a writer.
It is one of the truest things I've ever heard in my life.
True fact.
So here is the first question from Stellar Duck. What is the most labor-intensive part of producing material? Writing, art, design? I suppose that any particular part prone to cause delays.
Yes.
Yes, exactly, Graham.
The answer is yes.
Actually, Graham's spot on. The answer is yes. Loosely, the writing, you can generally say, oh, that'll take a couple of months and we'll have ourselves a finished text ready to develop and move on. But everybody has issues. Art, equally, if you have a single artist doing everything, Mark can talk to that right now, that's a completely different situation to, say, having 20 artists, who are all working on a 1 month turnaround, which means within a month, you've got yourself an entire book illustrated, or alternatively, one artist working their way through the entire book. That can take, well, how long can it take, Mark?
Well, it doesn't. It doesn't. It takes a long time when you put all your art eggs in one chicken, and it doesn't help when he goes out for a walk around the neighborhood. I don't know if you can see. I've got a big swollen baby hand at the moment. That's my normal hand. Big swollen baby hand on account of getting stung by something.
And that is that's vastly reduced from yesterday too, isn't it? It was worse yesterday.
I couldn't claw my fingers around yesterday.
Look
So
like
obviously I'm not drawing at the moment, so that doesn't help. Certainly with the art, I mean, certainly going into this, when we started off, it was very much with the intention that I was going to do all the art. Partly as a challenge to myself, partly as a selfish, no, I want to do it all, and partly to actually establish the style for what the products that we're going to make. So it's easy to do when you've got one artist there setting that standard. And some of the creative choices that we made as a group were then determined by the fact that, it'll be much quicker if. So I sort of embraced all that sort of stuff. Of course, I hadn't expected initially to also be doing the layout. So doubling up my workload there. Having said that, I am enjoying it, and it is nice to be able to say, I know, I want to paint a picture of so-and-so, and if I work out where the text is going to go from the start, it gives me a perfect space in which to fill. So, as Andy said, yes, hopefully it'll be very pretty. But yes, it will take, it will be labor-intensive for sure.
Yeah.
I'm just going to... Oh, sorry, Graham, you go.
I was just going to say, it's worth pointing out, too, that there are pros and cons to having art and writing working in parallel. The pros, which we're experiencing right now in the Rookery, is that Mark produces this amazing stuff that makes us writers go, oh my God, we're including that, or that little detail, I'm going back, I'm putting that in, and so on. The con, or the biggest con I ever encountered, so to speak, was at Games Workshop with a product called Codex Titanicus, the first expansion for Adeptus Titanicus. And there was a piece of art came in which showed a Titan climbing a building to get the advantage of high ground with its power claw. And yeah, exactly. It was sort of like that, and shooty, shoot. And Jervis, the designer of Adeptus Titanicus, Jervis Johnson, hadn't accounted for this in the rules. And I went to him as the developer and said, shall I just whip together some rules for this? And he said, no, absolutely not. This is not happening. So I went back to John Blanche and said, we can't use this picture. And the art director, John Blanche, said, the picture's paid for. You're bleeping well using it. And so, we ended up with a supplement, an illustration in the supplement, which of a situation that could not happen in the game.
Wow.
There's a comment from Zoltan, although Andy, you sort of answered it. He had mentioned it as you were saying, and where do you put testing? Sometimes it sounds a bit like for IT projects. Speaking from experience, testing is the part that is often put under pressure and reduced. I'm sure that chimes with a lot of us who have either worked with video games companies or even, I don't know, been the poor user that received one that maybe could have done with a bit more testing. You're absolutely right. And then Darker Days Radio has, this is quite a long comment, but I'll sum it up. And that is that what Andy Law described is a waterfall model, and most software development, in the software development world, people are moving towards more agile practices. And this is one of the things I spoke to Andy about when he was still at C7, actually, to say, could you be more agile? Because my background was in program management. And that's something that we talked about when we very first established Rookery Publications, on how we could be more agile, less waterfall, and so definitely chimes with us, the idea of being less waterfall and being more iterative, going backwards and forwards. You still have, right, a minimum viable product at the end that you have to pick what it is. And if you remember on Wifrit 4, that minimum viable product ended being released, and the community did a lot of the proofreading for us because of the choices that were made then. So that is a really interesting example of a more agile way to do something.
Well, it works. I mean, it certainly works. I mean, I'll make one point on that. We did discuss being agile. We even used that word. Oh my goodness, who are we? When we were putting together how the products are getting done. And I think that we've ended up with a system that is a mixture of both, in that we definitely have a clear line of where we're going to, but equally, for example, Andy at the moment, he's working through parts that are quite some significant length down in the production tree. Mark is sitting currently on a first product. I'm bouncing around between a bunch of them. Graham's dealing with writing something that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, quite a bit down actually. So we're all doing things as and where we need to, and also coming back and drilling into the necessary details to ensure that we can have everything ready for the future as well as what we have next. If we only dealt with what was next, I mean, our next product would be out much more swiftly, probably within a month or two, actually. We could, but if we had been just doing that previously, but we hadn't. But we wouldn't have all the other products all lined up and ready to go as well.
So Millie, the GM, has a question. What gods do you make offerings to in order to get Adobe InDesign or similar programs to comply with your needs?
It has to be Crom, because he breathes the strength into you initially, and thereafter he doesn't care.
No, he sits on his mountain.
It's such a shame that they actually don't listen, though.
Yeah,
because those programs do not always comply with your needs. And it's often the smallest thing. You think you've got something completely sorted, you've done it 40 times in a row, and then on the 41st, suddenly you're looking at it going, wait a minute, that's not done what it did all those other times. And then you realize you don't actually know how the piece of software works. You just know how to make it do that one thing really well. The second it doesn't do that one thing really well, all of your cause-effect models in your brain are blown up. And it's all going a bit David Hume with this philosophy, and I'm going a bit Edinburgh now. I'll pull away from that. Yes, it's sometimes a nightmare, and you'll find that this does actually impact companies, real big grown-up companies, a lot more than you realize. And particularly when a book's released and someone says, "Why did X and Y happen? I can see this," and they twiddle their thumbs and they don't fix it. Sometimes they just don't really know how, without having to change everything else as well. So they just leave it, print it, done.
Yeah, I mean, I would actually say that if there was to be a particular god, it wouldn't be a god. It would be that squirrel that runs up and down the world tree and carries messages. Because actually, what we rely on is our network. So, some of the stuff that Mark's been doing, the kindness of friends has come into helping you with software that you weren't familiar with. And actually, all of us in this industry have probably got involved, firstly, maybe not Graham and Mark, because they've always been super professional to me. But I got it.
At Flame Publications, I was in charge of feeding the hamster in the back of the Apple Mac we used.
But when I was an enthusiastic amateur, Graham and Mark were people who I looked up to. So we were enthusiastic amateurs. Andy and Andy what were you guys? I don't know, mods on the old Black Industries forums.
Back in the day.
We got into things because we were keen and excited and enthusiastic, and people liked what we did and gave us an opportunity. So yeah, it was that squirrel. He did it.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, squirrel.
There you go.
Yeah, it's a nice analogy, particularly as in the myth, he spreads rumors and lies and sows dissent.
No, that's not what he does. That's propaganda again. This is like the Beastmen last week all over again.
Oh, all right then.
Oh my God.
Oh yeah,
but certainly relying on absolutely the I mean, this is the first project I've done where I've had to use software like InDesign, and you might reasonably question the common sense of my first product with new software being a book that's over 100 pages. That seems like crazy talk. But fortunately, with Andy's experience and then Matt, a good mate of mine who I didn't realize actually taught InDesign at university. Yes, it's great. It's great to have people like that to turn to and go, why is this doing this? Why is it not sitting where I want it? So yeah, without that, it would have been a far more traumatic experience.
Yeah, Darker Days Radio says it could be worse than InDesign. Word. Venice Unmasked. I first put out to fans using the word, and it was pain. Yeah.
Oh, it's nothing compared to Microsoft Publisher, or at least as Microsoft Publisher stood about 10 years ago when I tried to use it.
Yeah, InDesign's just good at its job.
Yeah.
Good question here. How do you deal with feature bloat? Do you go for it, or do you take a mature approach always and think about what is required and what can be kept for another project?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. I think
a little from column A, a little from column B.
yeah.
That's right.
I'll address this one a little more directly. We are actually quite literally doing both. In that, when we first set everything up, we did not and purposefully didn't pin everything down. Because we were aware that through the course of us creating things, new ideas would come up, new ways of expressing things would come up, and also particularly for the first few playtests, which were going to be particularly key for how we were going to approach things, new ideas would be presented to us that we hadn't considered and we would want to include, and include in future products as well. So we, for our first set, our first bunch of products, we have purposefully not limited ourselves, but we are building all of the templates and models around those lack of limits to then form all the limits that we will have for the later products, where we will then say, yeah, as much as I would love to write all this other cool thing that I really love, we're not doing it for this product. This product is this. This is what it is. This is what we'll do. And we'll obviously amend it as we go along, as we all decide that extra little things probably should go in, because that's cool. But we will have templates because they're going to be required to ensure that we hit up all of our own internal targets in terms of time, and it doesn't just yawn on into the abyss as the eternal project that never quite comes to an end. So we're doing a bit of both in that at the beginning, we're allowing ourselves the freedom to really go a bit wild, while simultaneously realizing that as we pin all those things into place, they will become the templates that we won't
I think
move beyond as much.
We're also taking a fundamentally different approach than you might have experienced in other products or places you've worked, in that the process you described, Andy Law, was very waterfall in terms of the writing's done, then someone does an art order, that art order is delivered, whereas that's not the approach we have.
No.
You know, Mark is creating art, and sometimes the art comes first. So sometimes something Mark draws is sparking ideas, and we're going back to the text and changing it. And I don't think that will ever change, because that was a fundamental cornerstone of what we wanted to do as a creative team, and that was not have art at the end after the writer.
Absolutely.
No. I'll also occasionally come up with a fantastic pun, and that fantastic pun is then something has to be written about that.
Yeah.
Oh,
Every time.
Every time. Yeah. Yeah. So in short, what we're doing is we're inventing the process as we go along, based on our experience and all the things we've wanted to do but been prevented. And with that process in place, our hope is that it'll be a lot smoother going forward, but we will have done all our learning up front.
Yeah.
And a big part of that as well, I think, is the nature of the system agnostic thing that we're working with as well.
Yeah.
It's something that none of us have kind of directly done before. And while there are system agnostic things out there, that they're not exactly the kind of sort of tapestry of interconnected elements that we're looking to do. And those of you that were involved in the playtest, you think back to some of the questions that we asked you in the questionnaire there about not only what did you like, but what did you find useful, and why did you find it useful, and what was a barrier to you using certain things? And that was exactly us trying to kind of work at that. So again, when you look at Ship of Fools, not only will it perhaps have been modified in some of the ways that Andy's mentioned before, but we've also kind of tightened up and changed slightly how we present things like the NPCs, and that's then feeding into what we're working in terms of presentation of creatures and presentations of locations and things like that as well. So so you guys, those of you who are involved in our first playtest and will be involved in our future playtests, are very much a part of our initial kind of pinning down that kind of format. Obviously, we can't go changing the format of our NPCs in every product that we release. We need to establish what that format's going to be, but that's why we wanted to playtest that so rigorously. So
that's right. As well as inventing the process, we're inventing the technology, so to speak.
Yeah, absolutely.
Here, a question from Zoltan. So how do you determine your minimum viable product to be sure it fits what the customer is expected? And I think the starting point for us was that we're all gamers. Some of us tend to be more GMs, some of us tend to be more players. So we do use our own, judgment, what we would like, what we think would be useful. And then we have the collected experience of creating products, the Discord community, constant Facebook and Twitter polls, the playtesting, which provides feedback, and just really by listening to the community.
Yeah. I have loose opinions on this one. How do we determine our product is cool? Because we think it's cool. We love them. And one of the things that I think is really strong with us is that we all land in slightly different places. And in some cases, really quite different places, which means we all determine different cool stuff. And when we get something that appeals to all of us in one way or another, inevitably there's going to be one thing that one person likes more than another. As is always the case, we all have preferences. But I think we're really a good team for that, because we've got people who do think quite differently how certain things should be presented. And every single time we've looked at something and gone, I think it should be this way, and someone else says, I think it should be this way, it's almost always a positive thing, because we can then merge them, twist them together, separate them sometimes, look at different ways that we can take both of those things into account. So ultimately, how do we determine our customers, our product that will best fit? It fits us.
Yeah, although in saying that, we do recognise in terms of the content of the product that we absolutely do have some blind spots. And so we will have, as part of the editing section, Andy didn't mention it, but that component in editing, you would usually have sensitivity readers, and we will, to read over our products to make sure that things that we're blind to, or we can't see because of our own biases, that we fix those before we publish.
Defo. That's part of, if you're looking for where that normally goes, it can go depending on where you are at different places, but it's normally about the proofreading stage.
Yeah, and also
so
in
once
play
the text
testing
is largely in place, but it also can happen throughout the entire process if you've got yourself a handy team of lovely people who are willing to read and reread texts that have been sitting there, particularly when you're looking at the concepts, certain key concepts you're attempting to present. Having yourself sensitivity readers to discuss those before you actually pin them down is essential in some cases.
So Seagoat asks, as a small company, how do you keep focused and keep on plan?
Who wants to jump on that one? I'll jump on that one quickly then. Right. So I think I alluded to this earlier. We are currently in our first spate of products, and thus we're actually not worrying too much about the focus and the plan as much as we would do if we were on the second set and we knew exactly what they're going to be filled with. Because they're our first set, we are happy to take the deep breaths, take our time,
test and learn.
Make sure it's right, test, learn, move on, and pin all of our templates in place. Then we've got ourselves a host of templates for NPCs, a host of templates for how locations are presented, templates for how adventures are presented. Even if the adventures are vastly different from each other in terms of their overall presentation, they still have a similar skeleton in the background to ensure that they have a consistent approach, shall we say. And that all needs us to decide what they're going to be. So at the moment, it's deep breaths and space. But after that, it will be a good question that we'll need to answer.
I think once we've established, well, actually, something we were talking about just in the last week or so was how many products do we think we're likely to get out in a year? How long should we take between seasons for Coil Crown and stuff? So yeah, we're still. It's in our minds already, even though we're still focusing on nailing down how a product should feel, how it should look, all the esoteric, all the visual, all the design stuff. We're also very much aware of how many of these can we make in any given time,
And I think like Andy, Law, yourself, and Graham, and Mark kind of are taking the lead on respective bits in terms of keeping us on track while, the engine room is writing, Mark is drawing. But I guess if there was an overall project manager, it would probably be Andy Law, who has the overall picture from start to finish. And so, as a small company, how would we keep focused and on plan? Once we've sized things and once we know how long they'll take, is kind of like Andy will be in charge of that project plan and be marshalling us.
I expect him to crack the whip from time to time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it will come. But
I'm
it's
ready
not
for
yet.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I can see Mark already.
I'm
got my shield up.
braced.
Yeah.
Yeah, but at the moment, as with everything else, we're still sort of gathering the data so that when we make a plan and a schedule and everything, it won't be nonsense and it won't immediately be overtaken by reality.
Yeah. I've already made them because I can't help myself. I've done this job before in the past. I know how long things normally take, and I know how much time we're going to have to take for most of the jobs, but not all, because we're approaching this in a very different way to how I've approached some other books in the past. Particularly with Mark doing all of the art. That's an interesting time sink, and depends on how that all falls apart, and that will gauge how other projects are tackled. Which ones then get collated together, which ones then fall into perhaps maybe 2 or maybe 3 products that are made a little bit smaller or bigger. And that'll be all discussed amongst us all. For as much as it's easy to say, I will almost certainly at some point crack, because that's an essential part of ensuring things are done on time. And we all have our own individual areas of responsibility. Graham, for example, is managing editor. He is responsible for making sure the words are shiny. Mark is dealing with all the art. He's responsible for making sure all the pictures are shiny. Andy is doing tons of writing. He's responsible for making sure all the stuff is shiny, where I'm sort of sitting there on the edge, making sure that they all wrap together as one whole set of products and they turn into a realistic timeline. That's my job.
Also shiny.
And hopefully all shiny together. But having said that, though, we are all in it together. There's no real, I'm sitting over here with my hands in my pockets and that's it. We're all doing similar jobs with each other. I'm writing quite a lot. I'm chatting with Mark pretty much all the time regarding how different things are panning out, because we've got so many shared experiences, and we all have different voices that we can bring, and we don't want to waste them, because we are a small team and we can do that. It's much more agile.
Yeah, so this is kind of a follow. We've almost answered this already. How do you manage issues, problems that arise through the development process? Well, we just talk to each other.
Yeah.
I have a diva moment. I have a screaming fit. Andy talks me down from it. I apologise to all offended. And then we move on.
Yeah. I'll speak more generally. Outside of us. Normally, when you're dealing with another company, whichever company this is, they have got specific people that are always points of call. So, for example, it's normally, say, a developer who's responsible for ensuring the line is done. So that means if there's an issue, the developer just says it's my way and that's it. And that's how it's resolved. With us, we're a smaller company. There is no real my way. So it's a matter of discussing it out. And we're all pretty cool, diva aside.
Yeah.
So how do we manage it? We're grown-ups.
Yeah, and we each have our experiences from dealing with companies and individuals that we are keen not to repeat.
Yes.
Yeah, that.
And we keep that in mind when dealing with each other.
Yeah. Yeah, so we're avoiding those things because we just don't want them. One of the reasons we're doing our own things is so that we don't need to really deal with anyone else anymore. We can create the stuff we love, get stuck in with it, throw it out, let you all use it any way that you want. We'll try to present it in the most open way we possibly can to ensure that you can use it any way you wish, so that we get all the benefits from this, doing the stuff we love, and you get all the benefits for having the stuff that we love, hopefully, and you love too.
Yep.
Great. There's no more questions at the moment on the stream. So is there any particular part of the process that any of you want to talk about in a bit more detail?
Yeah, I think, excuse me, as someone who's worked on both Realms of Sorcery and the Horned Rat, I think some explanation is due to the world. So here goes. From time to time, a product will be announced in a rush of excitement, usually by someone who thinks that it's okay to do so, but before it's actually real. And that can fall victim to changes in editorial direction, emphasis in a company, and other unforeseens. So, for example, when the Horned Rat was first announced, it was still believed at Games Workshop that the enemy within, that Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay would be a major priority in the company, and that all these things would come out. And in the event, as everybody knows, Woofrup and the first edition of 40K came out about a month apart, and one sold a ton of miniatures and the other didn't. And so, you know, priorities shifted. And same a little bit with Realm of Sorcery. You know, it just, because the priorities shifted, the company was less committed to producing the products that had already been announced. And some confusion arose when the title, The Horned Rat, was already out there, and Games Workshop decided, well, we ought to do something with this title that's already been announced, and decided to do a Realm of Chaos product with that title, which was totally different from the initial Enemy Within installment, and which also never got released. So cautionary tale here: don't announce anything until you absolutely know it's going to happen, preferably until it's actually finished and ready to go, because you know, in the words of the famous Prussian general, no plan survives contact with the enemy.
Totally true. I mean, with the Horned Rat alone, it was first announced back in 1988 and was just released this year.
Yeah, and writing on it only started in the middle of last year.
Wow.
It was a bit earlier than that, wasn't it?
Maybe.
No, it definitely was, because I was still, because it was largely done when I was there.
So
yeah.
2019 then?
2019.
Yeah, 2019, yeah, totally. But even that's an interesting one, because you've still got a couple of years worth of extra development and direction change when the person in charge, in this case me, moves on into another job, so someone else comes in and they take things into a different direction. And these are all things that can cause products to be significantly delayed in ways that people won't necessarily expect, particularly if you're not following all the, I don't know, the politics of what's happening with an individual company. You're just looking at the company as a whole and saying, oh, they've got a product announced. When does it come out? Then 6 months pass and it's still not there. Then another 6 months and it's still not there. And often there's all these stories that sit behind the scenes. And it's worth adding just a small part onto that, particularly if you're looking at, say, the waterfall that Lindsay was mentioning earlier, when one thing has to be done before the next can be done, before the next can be done, before the next can be done. All it takes is one single issue to hold that entire thing up. And a lot of companies are not necessarily well organized. So they do just run it in big, long trees, because that's easy. And sadly, that can mean that one delay, one person falls ill, gets COVID.
And when it comes to printing, that's not entirely within your control. So that is a third party, you know, printing, shipping, etc. So, you know, it's not always within your own company that the delay lies. I just think this one's quite funny. Darker Days Radio. So I am 5 years older than the entire development of a product I worked on.
Yeah,
there you have it.
There you go.
That's
Excuse
right.
me, I'm going to be Scottish and have a drink.
Iron brew.
Of Iron Brew.
Yeah, and development, I think, is probably the stage which is the most volatile and the least reliable. It's the least knowable going into the project, because I mean, with us, where we're developing everything in parallel and so on, it's a lot safer. But I've worked on products both as a writer and a developer, which when the manuscript has come in, the requirements have changed, or they've been misunderstood, or some priorities have shifted in the company, and the whole thing has to be pretty much rewritten from scratch in the development phase, to a point where its own mother wouldn't recognize it. And you know, that can add months.
Darker Days Radio said, don't talk to me about delays. I still have a paper to publish in a journal because of another author still holding it. It's now 3 to 4 years delayed. I have a friend who's an advocate, a barrister in Scotland. They're not allowed to either solicit clients or chase them for payment. And thus she has not been paid for work she did in the early 2000s, which is not that uncommon for barristers. So I think they hold the record probably.
Yeah.
And poor Flip-Top,
I've been
Mrs.
not paid.
Iron Brew.
I've been not paid. I've been just sort of don't work for
yeah.
people and they just bug it off.
Yep,
But that's a little bit more, blatant, isn't it?
Yeah,
It is.
Yeah, no, barristers
I think it's
usually
quite common
get
I think it's quite common in the movie industry as well. I was just reading Joe Straczynski's autobiography the other day, and there was a film script that he'd written, and the kind of vagaries of the option was he only had to get paid if the producer stopped making reasonable efforts to get the film made. But of course, reasonable efforts is not a legally defined term.
Means, yeah.
So it was only like $1,000. It was in the kind of like early 80s or late 70s, but he's still not been paid. I never will be.
Speaking of printing, we've seen lately the cost of shipping increasing when shipped from China, for example, or the new VAT legislation in EU. Is it something you've already considered?
Sadly,
it's a
yes.
pretty boring topic, but yeah, we've considered it.
And it's really depressing. And it's something that if we move into print, which we all want to do in one fashion or another, we are going to have to tackle. And it's a toughie in terms of ensuring that for a group that has no backing, we don't have nice financial backers to give us a nice cushion here or there. And we don't want to jump straight into Kickstarters and similar. That means we've got difficult questions that we have to get answers to, and they're complicated and quite dull. But as a single anecdotal piece of evidence, I was speaking to a friend of mine, and their shipping has just increased by 10 times on a product that they already had printed. 10 times.
Wow. Here's a more fun one. It's been a while since I ran a game playtesting Ship of Fools, but I'm somewhat out of the loop. Where in the development process are we?
Right, for Ship of Fools, we're in layout. If you go back to the beginning of the video, when you watch it later, assuming you came into the stream later, you'll see the entire process laid out that generally sits. It's currently with Mark. Mark is organizing how pretty it's going to look along with its art. Once that's done, it then goes to proofreading. Sensitivity readers currently have the text, so all of that will be installed at the same time. And we're pretty much done. But it's one product amongst several. And I wouldn't like to say that the second we finish it, we'll necessarily throw it to everyone. We've got several discussions that we've still got going on behind the scenes. You'll find that What Rides Beneath will have its playtest almost certainly first. There are a couple of other products sitting on the side of that as well, one of which is going to not necessarily be play tested, but it's most certainly going to want to have several eyes looking at it. So we've got quite a few things to put in place on the side. But Ship of Fools is done. All the play testing. Thank you so much, everyone. It's all been installed. It's all in place. It's now just the spit and polish of making it pretty, and I make that sound so easy.
Yeah. That's all. Just a little thing like all the art and all the layout. That's all.
Is that all the art needs? Some spit and polish? Is that all that's required? We want to be in a position, I think, certainly before we put the first product out, that we've got like the entirety of the first season straight. Because you never know, you might get halfway through developing the first season, and realize, that thing we did in Ship of Fools. Well, we've done a new we've tweaked that in the third product, and actually, if we go back to Ship of Fools and maybe make some adjustments there, it'll make it a little better and bring it in line with all the other stuff. So I'd like to think we want to at least have the first 3 or 4 products like locked away before we release the first one. Just so we know, we feel confident that we've established a quality bar across all the various aspects of the product before we bring any of it to players. But yes, spit and polish as well. Plenty of spit and polish.
Just spit and polish, and that's it. It's done.
Which maybe a public service announcement. Please don't spit on your computers. It won't make them work any better.
It might polish them though. But having said that, though, we're also working on products after those first set as well, because we don't intend to just have that all done and then go, whoa, oh, now we've got the next bit, and then a whole host of extra delays to go on top of that. We not only have the next set planned, we also have the set after that planned, and planned right to the very end of the entire Call Crown. We know exactly what's loosely going to be in all of that. It's just how we're going to collate each part together.
Right.
So the actual information, we know what it's going to be. And we are working on it.
And that's very necessary since, given that everything is connected, it's all part of a greater whole. It's something that, for example, sadly didn't happen in the original Enemy Within campaign, which is why the final installments didn't quite work as well as they should have.
Yeah, it's if I was going to say that there was one job that I definitely do, it's that.
Yeah.
Is making sure that everything does definitely link, and everything is foreshadowed from beginning right to end. Because often, if, for example, you're working on just writing a piece, that is what's important. So you work on that piece, and then I'll come in afterwards and say, well, we could really add that in, that in, that in, and that in, because that will then foreshadow all these other bits. And they won't necessarily have come to mind when you're working on the individual piece of writing. Indeed, you might not even know that bit because someone else might be working on it.
Yeah.
So it's my job to try and make sure that all of that sticks together. And it's quite fun.
We've got a question to Mark. How different is the TTRPG art process from your experience in video games?
It was elements of it are similar. Certainly the sort of the concept stage, sketching ideas out, throwing concepts and loose illustrations forward. But what I love about the tabletop stuff is you get to follow that process all the way through. You're not just doing concepts, you're doing the illustrations, you're working very closely with a small team of designers. And in my case now, literally assembling the book. So it feels far more involved. It's far more of a personal visual project. Whereas with video games, you know, I would do concept art and then you set your children off into the world and 3D modelers and animators come in. And as wonderful as it is to see a concept taken into a finished in-game creature or character running around in a world you sketched out. I mean, that is amazing. You are so reliant on a team of 50, 60 artists potentially to bring that together. Whereas this, it's interesting because I can think about if I'm doing a sketch for an illustration for Ship of Fools, I don't have to think about what this character looks like from every angle. You know, I don't have to draw. I don't have to do turnarounds. You know, they will be what I present them as. So the decisions I make about the art are a little more singular, a little more. Well, this is the be all and end all of this character or this creature, unless I draw them again. So it feels it's more sharply defined. But in terms of the back and forth with writers and designers and stuff, that's still very much what I did in video game development. You know, there's still all that bouncing around of stuff, and that's the joy of it, really. I mean, I've never do anything that wasn't improved by getting somebody else's opinion on it.
Mm-hmm. Here's a question from Seagoat. With regards to printing versus PDF, from your combined experience, do you find any difference in producing for PDF only compared to print and PDF?
As I presume the question there is there much more work in terms of working towards a printed version rather than just a PDF version? And the answer is naturally no, there's not that much more work. There is a lot of work on dealing with the printing side, because you've got quite a lot of backwards and forwards with the printer, and each printing house, pretty much every printing house I've dealt with has been different, and they have particular needs for how the PDFs are presented to them, and they will change depending on which printer you're dealing with. And sometimes if you're dealing with a printer that doesn't speak English as a first language, you can get miscommunications as well. So the whole process of dealing with the printer is most certainly a whole extra step, which can add sometimes weeks, if not months, onto a process. For example, just to give a single example, the Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay starter set had a box produced in Ireland, and the company that was dealing with that were brilliant. But the software that they used to import all of the PDFs just was not compatible with our PDFs. And it took us about 3, maybe 4 weeks to eventually get them properly talking to each other. A great deal of chat between the layout artist, who had to constantly tweak again and again and again on the PDF sites. Me, who was dealing with the actual chat and the emails, and then moving back towards the company. And they were beautiful to work with, absolutely wonderful. The final result was great. But that was a whole unexpected delay that wasn't at all accounted for, because everyone expected upload it, done. Do you have anything to tweak? Tweak, done. Where it actually turned out to be an extra month.
Yeah, I just wanted to, Darker Days Radio's got quite a long comment, but it is about the differences between PDF and print in terms of things like the bleed, the placement, the gutter, etc. But I think I'm right in saying that what we're doing is we are prepping as though we were going to print anyway.
Yes, effectively, it just means that you organize the PDF with all the bleed in place. For those of you who don't know the bleed, that's the extra little bit around the edge that should the book be cut, it goes over any bits that go over the edge will just go white because it hasn't got color on it. So the bleed is the bit that goes out the edge. That's a very poor description from me there. Regardless, it's the extra bit in the edge. And you just prepare your PDFs with the bleed in place, with all the print specifications in place beforehand. And it means that when you actually get round to producing the final PDF for digital, you just don't include the bleed, away it goes.
Yeah.
Here's another question from Just a By Nerd, more towards the writing aspect of the project. Is it hard to find inspiration as you, Andy Leask, are near the start of the process? Also, thanks, Mark. That was super interesting.
No problem.
I mean, is it hard to find inspiration? Like, no, if anything, the opposite. I mean, occasionally the freedom can maybe be a little bit daunting, because you can write absolutely anything. But again, we were very adamant at the beginning that we were doing both a story and the world in which that story takes place. And what that means is that we've got two things to be creative on that feed one another. So the more we think, well, we need this element in place for the story, which means I need to make this inside the world, which then engenders other ideas for stories, which then fleshes out the world, which then engenders more story.
Yeah.
And we're in dialogue with each other, and I'm also slightly in dialogue with myself about those different things. And it does mean, again, one of the nice things about this, the fact that we are taking our time with our first products and making sure that we get them right. Just today, I'm working on, as Andy said, something for a kind of a future season now, looking at locations. And previously, we'd had a different structure in mind for how we were going to do this, with things being split up into smaller chunks that were structured very similarly, because for our initial release plan, that kind of made sense. We thought that now and decided to lump that back together and think about a bigger location at once. And it just occurred to me, I was unsatisfied with what I was writing. I was struggling to find inspiration, because to find enough locations to kind of tease out and write that I wanted to, it just wasn't quite fitting inside the format. And I literally had the epiphany, well, I don't need to stick to that template. Not every district inside this area needs to be structured the same. I can structure them according to the needs of that district and the locations inside that district. And suddenly that was enormously freeing. And had we stuck rigidly to that initial plan, we could have made a product that would have been good, but it wouldn't have been as good as I wanted it to be. Whereas now I know that product will be better, because the locations will be fleshed out the kind of way that they need to be. So.
Yeah, it's one of the, I'll add a little bit to that one, actually. One of the great freedoms about not, at the moment at least, working towards specific deadlines and specific print requirements means that we don't need to do what we did with, say, the starter set, just since I used that as a previous one. Andy and I worked hand in hand with a lot of the writing on the starter set. And for that, I gave him a very clean template. I want this many words on this location. I want 2 paragraphs, first paragraph this, second paragraph that. I want 2 adventure hooks. I want it like this and I want it like that with this many words, because I've got to make sure it fits in these particular pages. I had the whole thing planned ahead of time. It meant the writing for it was super easy, as writing ever is, in that you had a very clean set of guidelines to fit with, and it was very easy to parcel in the necessary pieces of information. But equally, it meant that it was also quite constraining. Whilst sometimes constraints are good, because it almost makes you have to think in different ways to fit everything you want in. But it means now that we can look at similar things and go, well, we can just breathe a little and do that with it instead, form new templates that have a little bit of give for those of us who are swelling around the midriff. And we can loosen the belt strap once or twice and reset the belt at a new level, and away we go. Not being constrained in that way, I have found very, very useful.
So Zoltan's popped a question in a little bit earlier, but I've just gone back and pulled it up. On top of what you've already seen, when will you be ready to sell your products? How do you see all the advertisement in order to create interest in the market? Good question. With my eyes.
Yeah, good question. Anyone want to take that one before I dive in?
Only to say that it's actually something we've been discussing in our regular meetings, and Yeah, we're definitely thinking about it. Haven't got too many answers yet.
Yeah, the last word, marketing. I mean, that's pretty much what it's all going to boil down to, and doing the necessary work there. We would love to not have to.
But at the same time, some of the marketing and some of the advertising that we do doesn't feel like it is. So the article article in the interview in Phoenix magazine was really good, helped us get to know each other more, as well as helped, the readers of Phoenix magazine get to know us and our products. Some of the streaming that Andy and others have been invited to do, Graham, your blogs, the community on Discord, that's all part and parcel of building ourselves as a community, and in the longer term as a company that creates and sells what are hopefully interesting, exciting, unique products. And I think, if you have a really great product, then that speaks for itself, but you need to be out there speaking about it for itself as well.
Yeah, I think that's it, isn't it? As beautiful as we hope everything we do is going to be, in order for us to continue doing it, people have to know about it and then go and grab themselves a copy. That's right. Yeah, that'll be a whole nother level of campaign, I think, once we start working on the marketing.
Yeah, and that's why the community is so vitally important to us, on Discord and elsewhere. Not only are we getting the incredibly valuable feedback and the play tests and everything, but hopefully we can grow the community, and people will like our products, and will also evangelize our products, tell their friends.
Please, that would be lovely. When they come, the marketing to some is something that we are consciously aware of. We'd love to avoid. No, we can't. But also know that we've only got a certain amount of time, as we're a small team, that we can dedicate to it. So we have to ensure that we maximize everything that we do to ensure that it doesn't do something like impact something that we're doing for a website or a particular blog post or whatever. So yes, it's something that we will continue to discuss and have probably cleaner answers in about a few months.
Mm-hmm. And as Seagoat says, like creating interest in the market by a weekly live stream.
You never know.
More wisdom from Seagoat.
Oh, Seagoat, you wise man.
Now there's a thought. Yeah.
Is a Seagoat a Capricorn? Sorry, that was just a random interjection. Anyway,
we need a Seagoat in the bestiary. A very wise, sagacious Seagoat.
like the Sphinx, the riddle of the Seagoat. So that is us coming up to the end of our allotted hour. Thank you all for joining me for another Saturday evening of exciting streaming chat. Any closing remarks from any of the Rooks before we sign off? What are we talking about next week?
Oh, I don't know. Do we have that one up yet? I don't think we do. We've got what we're doing in 2 weeks. In fact, in 2 weeks' time, there's somebody who's currently on the chat stream right now who's going to be joining us. Darker Days Radio, right down there. He's been chatting away and throwing comments. He's going to be coming along, and if he wants to drop a comment and say what he's going to be discussing, we can do that. We'll pop it up on the social medias after. And we'll pop it up on Facebook and we'll pop it up on Twitter. I don't think we've got next week's one marked down though for our sheet. So
we did decide what it was. I'm now having a mental blank and can't remember what it was that we decided.
That was me covering that.
Amnesia. The challenges of amnesia.
Yes.
I know. Oh well. We'll see you all next week for a mystery topic. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your Saturday. Bye.
Bye.